Although one thing that I realized once I got past a certain stage is that the Germans don't speak good German either.
No, they don't. It's the Germany Experience, the podcast about life in Germany as seen through the eyes of outsiders. And if you're in Germany, I hope you're enjoying some newfound freedom as Germany slowly starts to get back to normal. Is it too soon to get back to normal? Not for me to say. It's too soon. So yeah, but still, it's nice to have all of these freedoms back and a little bit of normality returning to life, I guess. But I will say, this whole wearing a face mask thing is making it very difficult to talk German. For one, I feel like the mask is like a barrier and I feel the need to speak through it. So I tend to speak louder through it. So I guess I get kind of shouty when I've got the face mask on. But the biggest thing for me to deal with is suddenly not being able to see the mouth of the German speakers. And I'm realizing just how important this is because I'm just suddenly struggling to understand people and I have to ask them multiple times to repeat what they say. So it's very, very difficult. And I mentioned this on the Facebook group, the Germany Experience Facebook group, and I got some comments in response, and I'll just read some of them about people. I basically asked, is anyone else finding that face masks make it way harder to speak and understand German? And there were a few yeses. Fiona wrote, yes, it's much harder. It's like, if you wear glasses and you don't have them on, it's difficult to hear. I did not know this about glasses wearers. I didn't know that, but it makes sense because you can't see the visual cues that you're using for comprehension and understanding. Somebody replied to that. Lean replied to that and said, Fiona, even if I have my glasses on and I can hear what people say, I still need to look at their mouth in order to understand what they want to tell me, no matter what language it is. That's interesting. Noor wrote, especially with the umlauts. Sarah Slick wrote, at first it was really hard, but living in Japan for about 2 years gave me a lot of training. And yes, I'm hearing a lot about this. People who lived previously in Asia and who have experience wearing face masks, I guess they're a little more used to this, so not such a big thing. Vlad wrote, I just don't speak to people while wearing a mask or who are wearing a mask. That's going to go well, Vlad. That's going to help you integrate and be a meaningful part of society. And Raphael said, I need subtitles under the mask. To which Beth replied, Germans aren't used to subtitles, only dubbing. So that is it. And Judy, who I know is in the States, wrote, very interesting. For whatever it's worth, it's sometimes hard to understand what people are saying here with masks on, and there's no foreign language involved. Because we're all speaking loudly, I sometimes let people know that I'm smiling at them since they can't tell. They may just think I'm shouting. And there's a few people have also said that, there's a lot of shouting going on between people. And by the way, the smiling thing was something that also came up on Instagram, on the post that I made there, where somebody was saying that they just give a thumbs up to show that they're smiling because there's no way to show it. So yeah, it's just making things a little more complicated for communication. All right, something else that was in the local news here near Nuremberg recently, and it just suddenly struck me that maybe people don't know this about Germany because it's so strange. I come from South Africa, so this is not something we had back there, but every now and then during a construction project, they will unearth a bomb from World War II. So it's a bomb that was dropped by the Allied forces over Germany. And some of these bombs landed and never exploded. And there were so many of them that they kind of, I guess, just got buried when people were building over them. Or I don't know, somehow these live bombs were everywhere. And that's the thing, they're live. So they could still explode. So every now and then in Germany, you'll have these news reports of an entire area being evacuated. So a few suburbs in the area where they've discovered one of these live bombs. And that happened in Nuremberg last week, where a whole suburb was evacuated so that they could defuse the bomb. And it's just a very strange thing that there's all these live bombs underneath the ground and they are getting discovered by construction projects. All right, now I'm just about to get to the guest of this episode, but before I do, you might want to stick around to the end of the show because at the end I'm going to tell you what's coming up in the next 2 episodes, and I'm very, very excited about the next 2 guests in the next 2 episodes. But first, let's get to this week's guest, who I'm also excited about, by the way. Just to be clear, I'm always excited about all of my guests. It's Thomas Cartwright, and he works in the video games industry in Germany. And he works for a company called InnoGames, and it's exactly the kind of company I'm always suggesting that new foreigners to Germany try and find. I often say look for those international startup companies where the language is maybe English and where the mindset is very relaxed, and you're going to be working with a lot of other international people, it's really a good landing spot. And InnoGames is exactly a company like that. And I sat down with Thomas, and he tells me more about what it's like to work for a company like he does. And of course, we talk about how he ended up here in Germany, how he taught himself German with the help of Memrise, and about getting angry letters from neighbors. Here's Thomas. Why don't you give us a brief background, where you're originally from and how it is that you've ended up in Germany?
Okay, well, I was born in 1986 in Birmingham, in England, and I spent about 18 relatively uneventful years there before going on to university. And when I went to university, I was surrounded by Germans. There were, I think, the second largest country group at Oxford after the Americans, and of course British people, I guess. And I got involved with one of them. She became my girlfriend, and at the end of my degree, I had studied physics, and I wasn't really sure about carrying on down the physics track. And I went to America to do an internship, and at the end of that, it was the end of 2008. It was the global financial crisis. And I thought to myself, why don't I give Germany a go? Because there wasn't much chance of getting a job in the UK at that time. I asked my girlfriend, and she said, yeah, I'll help you find a flat. She found a flat for me, and I was working, doing odds and ends, odd jobs, student work, proofreading dissertations, doing a little bit of translation work, learned a great deal about the sinking of the MS Estonia, I think it was. Very interesting topics, but
just
no
incidental
proper work.
Knowledge that you learned.
Indeed. Yeah. And then after a few months of just sort of living from invoice to invoice, I was contacted by a games company in Hamburg to do some support work. And I was employed to effectively read the support queries that were coming through via email, and occasionally doing telephone support in English, because the normal guy who did telephone support, he was German. He only spoke German, and he would have a great deal of fun screaming and shouting at the users. It was
that sounds like good customer support.
Honestly, I suspect some of them were just ringing up to have the experience of being shouted at by him, because it was quite epic. My approach to customer service was somewhat more laid back and helpful. Right. I'd like to think.
Yes. More British, if you will.
Indeed, yes, more polite. And after a couple of months of doing this, the CEO, is a relatively small company, came up to me and said, "Would you like to do some marketing? You know, you've done physics. You know,
it fits.
Manage a Google campaign." Yes, indeed. I don't know. And I had absolutely no experience in doing so, but I said, all right, I'll give it a go. I got hired, and I ended up getting involved with designing their business intelligence systems and user management systems there, and doing sort of analyses, getting inside of the databases, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I had a great deal of fun doing so. Unfortunately, in this time, my brother died, and my attitude to Germany at that stage was an interesting one. I liked the place, I enjoyed it, and I was there to be with my now ex-girlfriend, but I never really felt like I wanted to integrate. I never really felt like I belonged here. I was often frustrated by the way, many of your audience probably recognize how the Germans can be quite direct.
Yes.
And there were some funny stories, like when I was on the train, and somebody trod on my foot. And of course, as a British person, I was trained to say sorry. And he stopped, turned around. He was clearly, he was aware of what he'd done, but he had no intention of stopping. But after I said sorry, he stopped, turned around at me with a look of puzzlement and confusion and asked me why.
Why?
Yes,
Why
are you sorry? Exactly.
Because I'm not even sorry. Why are you sorry?
Exactly. And then, but other things were less pleasant. So, for example, I watched television after 8 o'clock at night, and I enjoyed doing so much so that I laughed. And I got a letter from my neighbor upstairs the next day saying that I had been laughing too loud. And that put me in a really, really bad mood. So I didn't actually feel at home here. I felt like an example, a specimen in a way. I felt that it would be better if once I'd sort of established myself, got my first job under my belt, then I would return back to the UK and carry on my career there. The actual timing was not my choice because of my brother dying. But when I did return, I really missed the place. I missed Germany incredibly.
Was that a surprise?
Yes, a little bit at first. I didn't realize what it was like to be an adult in the UK. Mm-hmm. So many of the frustrations that I had in Germany were more associated with the fact that I was now responsible for my own destiny, that I had to pay taxes, that I had to do all of these things that I wasn't expected to do when I was a child or a student. But now I'm a big grown up, the fun's over, I've got to take care of myself. Right. And I kind of attributed that at first to being in Germany rather than being in the UK. Of course, the language barrier was an issue, but the attitude, the fact that no one was around telling me precisely what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, was associated with the fact that, I wasn't a kid anymore.
Okay, so it wasn't necessarily a purely German experience that was negative in your first visit, but just the whole aspect of now being on your own and responsible for yourself. But I mean, that is a common thing that I hear of complaints from neighbors about things like that. And in fact, I had a very similar story as well. I was playing video games in my apartment when I was living in Frankfurt, and I had my headphones on, and they're wonderful noise cancelling headphones. And it was also a case of I was playing an online game and I was really into it apparently. And I was maybe playing until 2 o'clock in the morning. The next morning I woke up to a note under my door that said if I make so much noise when playing video games again, they were going to call the police on me. I was like, that's a little drastic. I mean, you can maybe talk to me first.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And sort of first offense, And also
come on.
The thing that bothered me also was the impersonal nature of it, because at least in my experience of similar situations in the UK, it was more along the lines of you bear it for about 10 years without saying anything, and then you make a sort of passive-aggressive mention to it to their faces. But going straight for the note under the door on, the day after, it's a bit over the top, I think.
And they always write those notes so smarmily. And like you say, the first offense, you're like, I don't deserve this right now. I mean, this is like a next level offense that I'm getting here.
The thing that I've come to learn is, and to be entirely honest, I must, because in between, since then, I have acquired not only the Irish, but also German citizenship. So I have 3 passports in total.
Wow.
But having become German, I kind of realized why it was written in that way was because she was right. It was the rules. They expect the rules to be followed. Right. And there is why should they accept someone else breaking the rules and them not being able to sleep? And I suspect that also part of the reason why she wrote was because sort of the mere affront that the rules were being broken, that her sort of inner sanctum was being violated. Yeah. That was bad enough. That was the offense. The noise itself wasn't the big issue. It was the fact that I was not following the rules, following the order of things.
Yes.
And
that's upsetting.
Exactly. Yeah. Doing it in a way that got into her area. Yeah. So yes, I had all of those very strange experiences. But then I realized the UK wasn't exactly much better. So I helped my mum sort some things out, and then I moved up and spent a little bit of time in Edinburgh. I worked for a software company there, but then one of my former colleagues from the first company contacted me and said that there was a position available at InnoGames, where I now work, and it was great. I was hired, and it was a wonderful process. They helped me move over. They translated everything into English for me, even though I had spent a little bit of time in Germany, and I knew a little bit. I knew my way around, but I hadn't really seriously started learning German because of this attitude until I moved to Edinburgh.
Right.
And I actually started there using.
You started in Edinburgh learning German. So was there a plan? You had the plan in your mind at that point to return.
Yes. It was primarily because I was so disappointed and so kind of missed the place so much that I thought, okay, if I go back, I'm going to make a real go of it. I want to do it properly. Yeah. And that, of course, meant having a much better understanding of German, and also being able to. I wanted also to do my own tax return. That was the thing that bothers me the most. That I had to go to somebody else to fill in my tax return.
That is a lofty ambition, Thomas. That is a very.
I've done it, and I don't know how much detail I should go into on a public podcast, but I do often get money back. So I hope it's for all the right reasons. But indeed, it works somehow.
So how did you approach learning then in Edinburgh? It's definitely far more difficult to do it when you're not living in Germany, surrounded by the language all the time.
Indeed. Actually, I'd argue that either being inside or outside of Germany was not the deciding factor. The thing that really helped me was when I changed my routine to regularly practice German. So when I was living in Hamburg the first time around, I was living my life entirely in English. Everybody spoke English to me. I could get by with almost everything in English, and for everything that wasn't possible, I had my girlfriend. What I did when I was living in Edinburgh was that I devoted at least half an hour a day to learning vocabulary using Memrise. So it's a primarily vocabulary learning tool with a kind of like gamification thing. So it visualizes learning words as planting seeds and then watering the seeds. So regularly revisiting them. And what I did was I just started watching German television regularly. And when I encountered a word that I didn't understand, then I'd pause the video, I'd look it up, add it to my list of words to learn. And in doing so, I rapidly expanded my vocabulary. I was able to learn, I think like sort of 7,000 or 8,000 words in this way over maybe 3 years or so. And in that 3 years, for 2 out of those 3 years, I actually learned 30 minutes a day, every single day, without interruption. It was only at one stage when I got a bit sick that I decided to give up the streak, at least. And I also used Memrise as well to learn the adjective and noun endings by rote, because of course I'm sure anyone who's even dipped their toe into German beyond school realizes that it's a complicated thing, and there are more exceptions than rules, and you have to learn a lot of things kind of by rote, and just having something that helps you to learn these kind of patterns and just have them ever present in your mind makes it so much easier to talk and to write a letter, because you don't have to look at everything to have the sense of satisfaction that you're probably writing a halfway decent sentence.
I think that's a big thing. That's something that comes for many people only after a few years, I think.
Indeed. Yeah. And I think I forced myself into it by having this lasted counter that once it had got above 100, I thought, no, I can't let this stop. And it got past
They got you.
300,
That's how they get
400, 500. And I got up to 1,000. I wanted to get up to 1,000 to see whether or not the website could manage it, whether or not it would reset back to 0. Turns out it didn't. And yes, I was, it was changing the routine and getting into the routine of doing that. It was irrelevant whether or not I was in Hamburg or in Edinburgh or elsewhere. I had that anchor to my life that I was doing every day. And that was what I believe has helped me learn German to the extent that I can. Of course, I'm not good speaking German now, so I'll leave it to your listeners' imaginations to decide how well I speak German.
Yeah. But what I find interesting as well is, in my mind, I sort of had the fantasy that as you learn a language, you just learn it sort of instinctively and you get the feel for it and everything. But that's not the case. And that's why I like what you said about learning things by rote. There are some things that you just have to memorize. You just have to put it in your brain sort of not instinctively. And that's the only way you'll learn it. And I think that's a lot of where my bad habits from German has crept in, is that I didn't do that in the beginning, memorizing the right things. And it's certainly... I certainly have a lot of bad habits in my German because of that.
Although one thing that I realized once I got past a certain stage is that the Germans don't speak good German either.
No, they don't.
And it's your classic native speaker. Oh, I want to find a better word than arrogance, but sort of confidence. So, for example, if we were to look carefully over the transcripts of the two of us speaking, there'll be dozens of mistakes there.
Oh, yeah.
Places where we've mispronounced and used the wrong, but we get away with it because we do it with the confidence of a native speaker. Even if it is wrong, the fact that we're saying it makes it right.
Yeah.
And it takes a certain level when you are speaking German to accept actually that you will occasionally make mistakes, and there'll be slightly different mistakes than what native speakers make. But generally, the native speakers don't. They notice your accent, but they don't notice your mistakes because they filter out the mistakes of other Germans as well.
As long as you're saying it with a certain amount of confidence, then you're good.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I suppose that's the definition of fluency, actually.
Yeah. It never ceases to amaze me when I listen back to some episodes of this podcast and listen to myself speaking, and I go, oh my God, people must think you have the worst grammar. I'm fairly good at writing. I pride myself on my English, my level of English knowledge, but Jesus, when I listen back to it, I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you even doing a podcast, Sean? Stop it. Mm-hmm. But it's exactly right. When you're saying it with a native speaker confidence, then it's a whole different ball game.
Indeed.
So you returned back to Hamburg. What was that like for you? Was that like a bit like coming home in a way, or was it just a new start for you? How did it feel?
Kind of both. It was a new start in the home that I didn't really know I had before, that I had not learned to appreciate the first time around, and it was made a lot easier by InnoGames. They even though I was kind of like, I wasn't your classic case of someone moving to Germany from abroad. I'd already been there. I'd already lived there for a couple of years, or here rather. And they paid for the move. They assisted me in looking for a flat. They did actually take a lot of the edge off of dealing with that. But I quickly found it was just, I just decided to take care of some things myself, even though I had the support to do the Anmeldung, the registration. I didn't need it. I was just able to take care of it myself. And it gave me a sort of sense of satisfaction that I was able to stand on my own 2 feet in Germany. And nonetheless, I wasn't that confident, because it was back in 2013 that I started there, and I'm still there, 2020. And but that back then I was doing the course that InnoGames provided, and it was actually quite good back then. It was one-on-one courses, and I had a lovely old lady called Uta who yeah, it was basically just a chat every week or so. And at the end of that, I got a certificate saying that I could speak B2 level German, and that was actually all that was necessary well, not all that was necessary. It was one of the requirements for me to become German. So I was actually able to use the certificate that I earned through work to get my German citizenship.
Yeah, that's a huge help. And I also had one-on-one courses, and I often tell people if they can manage that through their companies, they absolutely have to do that, because I learned a lot. I think I learned the most when it came to individual courses in German.
Well, actually, right now the Inner Games ones are generally group, I think. But what the groups are doing very well is that you have not everybody takes the courses, and it's not a requirement to learn German at InnoGames. The company language is English, all that stuff. It's, there are plenty of people who don't speak German. But those that choose to engage with the courses, they build up their own little study groups and actually do speak German with each other. So
right.
In my department, there's an Australian guy and a Nigerian guy and a Ukrainian lady, and we all speak German with each other as well. It's we have even also have set up our own extra German classes, as it were. So we take some time out of the day to sort of read an article together, have a discussion together about current affairs in Germany and beyond. And there's a significant number of people who really are engaged and really want to stay here long term, because Hamburg is a truly beautiful place, a beautiful city. And once you move here, it's quite difficult to permanently move away. Yeah.
What was interesting for me, I saw Hamburg for the first time in December of 2019, end of last year. And I went there and I looked around. I was there for 2 days, and I looked around and I thought, wow, if I'd seen Hamburg earlier, I'm not sure I would have ended up in all the other places in Germany that I ended up, because it's really a different city to anything else I've seen in Germany before, and really is quite spectacular.
Yes, it is. It is. And it's also, it's described as a very British city. In a way, yes. I wouldn't say it is a particularly British city, but there are lots of British people here. And it is, I think, characterized by the fact that we don't really talk to one another. Yes.
Is it a case of purposefully keeping distance from one another, or just the way it is?
So, for example, maybe you heard in the background there's sort of the clapping for health workers that went on in the background. Just
that's happening tonight. Yeah,
there are genuinely at least 2 families that were speaking when they were shouting out and saying good night at the end, that were doing it in English with an English accent. And I have never spoken to them before in my life.
It's just two ships
I have a British Mini outside, and it's clear to
it's obvious.
My number plate makes reference to the 1966 World Cup victory.
Okay.
And I have not had any contact with these people, even though I am sort of almost obscenely British in public.
Unapologetically British, even.
Exactly. Well, apologetically British. Otherwise, it wouldn't even be British. So
that's true.
Exactly.
That's a good point.
Exactly.
That's a very good point. So just while we're on the subject of the kind of company that you're working with, a whole bunch of foreigners, and it sounds to me like you were saying some people are working there and they could get by without ever wanting to integrate. Some people might have a temporary stay in Germany and they're working there. Tell me a little bit about working in the video games industry, and specifically InnoGames, specifically for foreigners, I mean.
For foreigners, well, the thing about the video games industry is that it's got a relative, in some cases, a relatively niche set of skills. Yeah. So things like game designers are unlikely to find much employment outside of the video games industry as a game designer, at least. And that means that we are, of course, looking for talent from all around the world. And that was the reason why InnoGames decided to have a policy of speaking English in the company. It's not as strict as other companies that I've seen. So other companies have enforced speaking English even between German native speakers, which I find to be a little bit over egged.
That's hard, yeah.
Indeed. So, for example, whenever I'm in a meeting with German native speakers, we speak German with one another.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as there is one person who does not feel comfortable or confident or would rather speak English, and sometimes Germans just prefer to speak English, then the meetings are in English, and of course all of the written documentation is in English only, and with the expectation, even if it's a German only meeting, minutes or documentation will be written in English so that anybody within the company can follow up on it. And it's a kind of economic argument that you have to look worldwide for your talent. That means you need to create an environment which is appealing to an international audience. It also offers not just because we are trying to get people from abroad, but also the kind of atmosphere that video games and the development of them sort of brings up around it. We drink together. We have parties together. We have a very active social life in the office back when we were working in the office. And it's a wonderful place to make friends and to have a great deal of fun while also doing a great job. But of course, it's not just, I don't want to give a misrepresentation of, it's not like we're all doing partying, we're all drinking and getting very drunk every week.
Sounds like a great, I'll be there next week, I'm implying.
There's free alcohol, of course, but there's also free beer.
Free beer. I like the way you say, "Of course," like it's the same in every company that you've ever been to.
No. It's just something I'm used to for 6 years now.
Ah, right. You're living the dream, Thomas.
Oh yes, I am. Mm. But also, it's not just heavy drinking because you can tell from the way I talk, I'm obviously a party animal. But there are plenty of families and parents who work there, and they also do things like Kids Day, and they also make sure that some of the parties are a little bit more family friendly as well.
Right.
It's also something the foreigners in particular can bring their partners in to these after work sessions as well. And also drink some of the free beer and also because many times it's couples which come over, and the husband or wife or the partner of the person gets hired should be able to bring their partner in, because often the partners are particularly socially isolated because if they've come over because of their husband or wife's job, then the person who has the job has free social connections because they're working with people, but whoever's at home might be stuck at home and not really have that contact. So we try to bring them into the InnoGames circle as well.
That's amazing. And I'm often telling people as advice, because I work in a very similar company. I'm also in a software. I mean, not in video gaming, but it's a software company, and they've basically tried as much as they can to have that sort of startup feel, but it's also very much a family environment. And there's a lot of English that's spoken. It's a very international company. I often say that if new foreigners coming to Germany can seek out something like that, it's the perfect landing place, because like you said, it even benefits spouses or family members that come with them.
Yeah, it's in our interests to make the transition as easy as possible.
Yeah.
What I particularly value about InnoGames is it's a kind of halfway. Well, not halfway house. It fulfills two different criteria that could be seen as conflicting, insofar as it offers a kind of island of English-speaking, relatively young people who all have a very similar approach to life, and watch similar TV shows, and have to build up a sort of sense of community, so you feel kind of at home. But also, they don't just abandon people on this island and sort of provide fun in English at work, and then abandon you to deal with the rigmaroles of life on your own with the German courses and the general support getting set up. They also help you integrate, help you take part in broader society. Stuff like blood donation, that's Inner Games is involved in, trying to encourage the employees to also take a little bit of social responsibility and get involved with the rest of German society as well. And I really value that. I value that approach.
Mm-hmm. I guess it's also fortunate. I mean, with everything that's happening right now, it just so happens that, we've just had some social distancing, people staying at home for a while in isolation and quarantine, or whatever you want to refer to it at. And I've read somewhere that video games is actually one of the sectors that's doing pretty well, because people are, streaming Netflix, they're looking for entertainment options, and a lot of people are playing video games. So it's not a good time for anyone, really, basically, is what, let's not make a mistake about that. But the video game industry is doing all right during this time, isn't it?
Yeah, no, we are safe, and it's quite an honor, and I feel quite privileged to feel secure in my job right now, because there are many people who aren't. And I appreciate that even though being in home office is more stressful, communication is a little bit more difficult, I'm really happy to be able to say that, yeah, my job is very much still going to be there in the coming weeks and months, and we're doing okay. And
yeah. That's a huge thing at the moment.
Indeed.
Yeah.
We're doing our best as well at Inner Games to try and sort of take care of the people in the company. So they're sending out food, cooked food, wow, to particularly families, because they recognize that taking care of children and doing your job in home office is quite a challenge sometimes.
Yes, it is.
And cooking on top of that, for example, lunchtime meal that you normally wouldn't have to do to take care of your children. They're offering, instead of course of our cafeteria downstairs, we're using the kitchens there to prepare food and to have that sent out.
But I think it's amazing that you're working for a company that's doing so much for its people as well. Because I can tell you, I work for a pretty amazing company, but there's no cooked meals coming to me. Our kids are literally getting scraps of toast at lunch thrown at them from a distance. Yeah, so I think we're just about getting to the end of our time, Thomas. And what I usually do with guests before we wrap up is ask them for one. What is the biggest bit of advice that you can give to foreigners coming to Germany? Either that have just landed, I suppose there's not many people that are just landing right now, but people who may have arrived or that are planning to come here in the future. What is your biggest bit of advice?
I think I've got two stages to my one bit of advice.
All right.
The first one is, don't worry about it. You can come here and not necessarily have a plan to stay here. But if you do fall in love with the place, make the commitment and get a routine where you are learning German every single day, because it can be very easy and tempting to just speak English, because more or less everybody can. But if you get into that routine, then after a couple of years, you'll have this eureka moment, and you'll realize, I understand everything that this particular TV program is saying, or I can have a conversation with someone about, I can do small talk in German, and the sense of achievement and liberation that brings is really quite impressive. And I it's definitely something that people should give a go.
Yeah. My moment was giving a presentation for a room full of people. I think there was about 20 people in the room, entirely in German. I think once I'd been here for about 5 years. That was like, I think the equivalent of me climbing Mount Everest, which is something that'll never happen. But it felt like that. Like at the end of that, I was like, oh my God, I just gave a presentation in German to people in a work environment for an hour. And that was, I think there's very few feelings that have come close to that kind of elation and sense of achievement that you get from that.
And primarily because there's always the fear that it will go horribly, horribly wrong. And then when it doesn't, and they even clap at the end, or
knock on the table.
Knock on the table, which is weird. But anyway, they'll do that. Weird. But you will think, I finally made it.
Yeah, this is it. And then the next day you'll land up in a stupid conversation in the kitchen somewhere where you say something really dumb. And then you go, okay, guess not.
I say dumb things in English anyway.
Yeah, pretty much the same as me. Thomas, where can people find you if you want to be found, that is?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Zing. You can also, if you want, you can find me on Facebook. Just look up my name, Thomas Cartwright, and I'll be there.
Right. I'll put links in the show notes to everything as well.
Cheers.
Yeah, and it's been a pleasure talking to you, Thomas, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, so now, as I said at the beginning of the show, I have some interesting news coming up about the next 2 episodes. And the next 2 episodes are going to be covering 2 YouTubers. You probably would have seen both of them around if you are active on YouTube and looking at information about foreigners in Germany. And the first one coming up next week is an American named Montana Showalter. And she was here in Germany for 7 months on an exchange program before she had to go back home because of COVID-19. So she has a very interesting story, and that's coming up next week. And then the week after that, I have an interview with someone who has been around for a few years now, I think 7 or 8 years on YouTube, and someone that almost everyone will recognize. It's Dana Newman, and she is coming on the show to talk about her book, You Go Me on the Cookie, and talk about how she learned German, and also about her YouTube channel. So I'm very excited about the next 2 episodes. It's kind of a double feature, if you want to call it that. I don't know what you want to call it. It's just 2 episodes featuring YouTubers that everyone will probably know. Otherwise, if you want to subscribe to the podcast, go to thegermanexperience.de/subscribe. And there you'll find links to join the newsletter. You can find links to the Facebook group, and you can find links to the latest episodes. It's all there on the same page, thegermanexperience.de/subscribe. If you want to get in touch with me, I'm on all the social medias. Find the links in the show notes, or you can email me. What? Or you could email me at info@thegermanexperience.de. That's it for this week. Music, as always, the theme song by my band 10 Cent Janes. Additional music by Ryan Anderson. Until the end, auf Wiederhören.